Toyota virtually reveals the all-new Sienna and Venza, both of which have intriguing powertrains. We discuss our test results of the 2020 Buick Encore GX, and do you still use your car's built-in navigation system? We answer a question about whether automakers are starting to phase them out. Next on Talking Cars. Hi everybody, welcome to another episode. I'm Mike Monticello.
I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
And I'm Keith Barry.
Well, for those of you that are watching as opposed to just listening to the podcast, you can see that we're still doing our remote version of the podcast due to the coronavirus pandemic. And with that, the first topic we're going to talk about today has to do with the coronavirus. And that is, what are car insurance companies doing about reducing the rates or giving credits or refunds on their people's premiums, knowing that far fewer people are out there on the roads right now, which makes things safer. Accidents should be going down. So what are insurance companies doing about that? Our own Keith Barry, who's on the show, wrote a story about that for us on consumerreports.org. So Keith, I'm going to throw it to you. What are people seeing and what people can expect to see from their car insurance companies over the next several months?
Great. Yeah. So we heard from a lot of car insurance companies who said that they were basically going to give discounts of anywhere between 10% and 20-something% for usually the months of April and May. And that's because of the fact that cars aren't moving, and a car that is not moving is a lot lower risk for an insurance company. There's a lot less chance that something's going to happen to it if it's just sitting in your driveway or especially in your garage. Now, if you think about it, 10%, 20% actually isn't a lot dollar-wise. And we've kind of, it sounds great. And the insurance companies who talk about this, they're using it as really good public relations, and it's something good to talk about. And it is good to give money back to consumers that would otherwise just be profit for the insurance companies. But, just asking around, it seems like people are getting... they're a little surprised at how small 20% or 10% of their insurance premium is, especially when it's divided out over the course of 10 or 12 bills. I know one of our coworkers said, I got $7 back. We looked at some national surveys that some companies that track the insurance industry do. Apparently, people got like 11% to 25% was about where it was, but sometimes that doesn't mean that much money. I mean, Mike, you got I'll tell you my story, but Mike, you talked to your agent, right, to figure out.
Right. I called up my agent because I got my bill for my Toyota.
Call my agent.
My old Toyota Tacoma. And it was the exact same. I mean, this was just a few days ago that I got the bill and I paid it. And it was the exact same cost as the previous one. And I'd heard that there's these refunds or lower premiums. And I'm like, I didn't get it. So I called up my agent and I was trying to be very polite about it. I said, hey, I'm curious what's going on. I thought there was going to be these refunds. And he said, what's happening is they actually can't, the insurance company I have, they can't do it until June 1st. He said, though, but I am going to see a 22% credit. It has to do with the 72-day period from March to May 30th. So there's going to be a credit on my next bill that I will see. He said I also could have just paid, half the bill. Of course, I didn't know that. He's in the process of calling his literally thousands of customers. He's an individual agent near where I live. And so he's in the process of calling everyone to tell them what is going on, but he just hadn't gotten to my name yet. And so he said that... he said they're not allowed to calculate the credits until June 1st. So, as I'm sure, Keith, you found out during your story, the car insurance is heavily regulated and, through the states. So there's a lot of stuff that they have to go through.
Yeah, they can't give discounts to some people and not to others. And anytime they give a discount, they have to ask, the state insurance commissions. And almost every state is to, go ahead, no problem. And the states are actually even collaborating that at a national level. I might actually ask you for the name of your agent because, I got an email that said, we've processed our refund, during this difficult time. We are looking out for our customers. Log into your online billing account to see how much you saved. And I logged in. It turned out that it coincided with a renewal and they actually jacked up my rates.
Wow.
So I'm actually paying more than I was before. And the billing, online billing is so opaque that I couldn't actually figure out, and I write about this for a living, I could not figure out how much money they actually refunded me. So I'm going to change insurance companies, honestly. And it's interesting. LendingTree did a survey that said only 31% of consumers asked their auto insurer for financial assistance. But of those who did, they're reaping the benefits, is what LendingTree said. 80% of them were successful. So it isn't just these automatic refunds. You can actually call your insurance company and ask for more money back. So I might do that first, but I have a funny feeling. I mean, yeah, time to, Jen, did you get any money back?
Yeah, so I'm in a very similar situation to Mike in that they've promised for May and June. If I calculated, it's like $30. Of course, I have teenage drivers, so my premium might be a little higher. So I'm hoping it's like $30 and not $7, but we shall see. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's good stuff. And so the good news is for a lot of people, you will be getting the refund. I mean, for my company, this is part of a $2 billion nationwide, not nationwide, the insurance company, but nationwide throughout the country refund that is going back to people. So for a lot of people, it will be happening. You just may not see it right now. But like as you said, Keith, call your insurance agent. If you really have a problem, you can't make your payment, they will. It sounds like a lot of them will work with you. So that's
yeah. They want to keep people as customers. They don't want to. I mean, they're not making as much money, and they want to keep people. So that is the goal there.
Okay. Well, remember, we have a full story on this written by Keith Barry on consumerreports.org.
And we also have our rankings of insurance companies. So you can find ones that are top rated and get rid of the ones like the one I have, which is down towards the bottom.
Yeah, you really got to pay attention to our own ratings, Keith.
I know. I should have looked at that first. They're the insurance company. I had them since, my parents had them, and I think it's time to switch.
You believe in loyalty. I respect that. Yeah. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to kind of like news part 2. And this week we're going to talk about some cars that were just virtually unveiled. They were cars that were going to be at the New York Auto Show this year, but the New York Auto Show has been canceled because of the coronavirus. And we're talking about the 2021 Toyota Sienna minivan and the 2021 Toyota Venza. And what's interesting about both of these vehicles is that they're both hybrids with no other powertrain options. And that's really a huge switch for the Sienna. And also with the Venza, it's a kind of reincarnation of a name of a vehicle that Toyota had for several years ago. But it's very different now. And so, Jen, we're going to start with you talking about the Sienna because you're a practical person. You go antiquing. A minivan is a great vehicle for someone who's going to throw a lot of stuff in there, not to mention kids. So talk to us about the Sienna minivan and what's going on with this now all hybrid all the time minivan.
Right. So get ready for me to talk for a little while, and I'm going to look at some notes here because there's a lot going on here.
It's a big vehicle.
Yeah, this is a big vehicle, and a big deal is that they're all the hybrid powertrains, 243 horsepower, 2.5 liter hybrid 4s with CVTs. It's interesting because you think of a vehicle, a model like the Prius, everybody knows that's a hybrid. So to take a more mainstream vehicle like the Sienna and to make it purely hybrid is kind of a big jump. And it speaks to Toyota's confidence in that powertrain and, in my opinion, how they've come a long way, that they're not now a compromise like they used to be. So front or all-wheel drive on the Sienna. All-wheel drive's always been kind of a neat niche for that all-wheel drive minivan for the Sienna. Again, they would add an additional electric motor to enable that all-wheel drive. Price between $34,000 to $49,000. That's kind of a big range, but there's a lot to add. Estimates are for 33 miles per gallon overall. That's fantastic when you consider the last time we tested a V6 Sienna, it was 21 miles per gallon overall. And the Chrysler Pacifica hybrid that we tested more recently was 27. So that could be a class leader for minivans if that proves true. Toyota's intention is that 25% of their volume sales will be hybrids by 2025. So this is just one step to that. The look and feel of this Sienna is also much different. They kind of flared it. They're trying to get away from that boxy minivan look. A little more sloping, different headlights, some rear fender flares. It looks really good. And the interior is all about creature comforts. Large center consoles, power seats for the driver, even on the base trim. There's the lower trims will seat 8 with that bench seat. The higher trims get captain's chairs with what they're calling the long slide captain's chairs in those upper trims with up to 25 inches of fore and aft travel and the ability, if you want to add an ottoman to that rear seat and kind of lounge back there, assuming your seat. I'm telling you, this is going to be the best road trip car ever. A vacuum option and a refrigerator for the highest trim levels. So I'm just going to go camp out. Maybe it could be my new office. Anyway, Alexa, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay compatibility, and then, of course, all of the safety that Toyota has offered. Toyota Safety Sense 2.0, forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, pedestrian detection, including, I thought this was interesting, the ability to perceive pedestrians or bicyclists in low light. Some of the data has said that they're not as effective in low light dusk conditions where they actually are in the most danger. So that will be something we will certainly look at. Blind spot warning, rear cross traffic warning, lane departure warning, automatic high beams. It just keeps going and going and going. And then, of course, now adding this rear seat reminder, which is similar to other systems we've evaluated, where it's based on door logic. If you open and close rear doors in a period of time before your departure, and you then get out, it's a signal in your dash that says, hey, don't forget to check your rear seat. This is to help combat these kids that are unknowingly left in the rear seats. That time of year is coming. So this announcement was quite timely. Just as an aside to that too, Emily had covered some data, our own Emily Thomas, that with all of us home and kids looking for places to play, to be careful of your kids using your car as a play space and getting into vehicles and then being in the warm weather now. That's another way that these hyperthermia deaths happen. But anyway, that's kind of a side to the Sienna. But so much going on. Can't wait to see it and drive it. This is going to be some fantastic road trip family car with all-wheel drive and a hybrid.
Yeah, it certainly looks interesting. Both it looks, visually interesting, as Toyota's saying they really wanted it to look more like an SUV. They've heard from the customers that their customers don't want to feel like they're driving a bus. And then of course there's the like you said, the full hybrid, the potentially 33 miles per gallon. There's hands-free, the option of a hands-free opening of the sliding side doors. So there really is a lot going on there. But let's move on to you.
And the kick.
Yeah, you kick it.
The kick lift gate too. So there's so much.
Yeah. Keith, let's move on to you and let's talk about this new Toyota Venza.
So the Venza, the old Venza was basically kind of a Camry wagon.
Yeah, it was like a tall wagon.
Yeah, it was like it was this sort of original, sort of tall wagon crossover-y kind of thing. And people like them. And I remember the ad campaign was like, it looks more stylish than an SUV. And they showed people pulling up to a campsite in a Subaru wearing socks and sandals. And then the people got out of the Venza and they were all dressed like for the, which I don't know.
I don't remember that one.
This is a totally different vehicle than that. This is like the Sienna. It's only going to be available as a hybrid, which means if you are looking for a Toyota SUV and you don't want something as big as the Highlander and you want something a little bit bigger than the RAV4, so in that like Ford Edge, Santa Fe, that Murano, that kind of the Honda Passport, that sort of middle space there. The only choice you'll have is a hybrid, and the estimate is that with standard all-wheel drive, it's going to get 40 miles per gallon overall. And that's huge for an SUV, for a big SUV with all-wheel drive. That's huge. So and they're not making it weird, it's not going to be a car that says I am a hybrid. This is just a good looking SUV. And I think that people might not even know that it's a hybrid. I think that people will go to the Toyota dealer and see the RAV4, say, I want something a little bigger, or, oh boy, that Highlander's too big for me. And they'll buy it. I think the other reason people will want this vehicle is because it's pretty good looking. It's based on a Japanese vehicle called the Toyota Harrier, like the Harrier jet. It has kind of looks like the Ford Edge, but it also has a lot of, it's almost a little bit Lexus-like. And that makes sense because the Harrier, the last generation of the Harrier was actually shared a lot with the Lexus RX. So if you think about it, this is kind of a Lexus-y like Toyota.
Look at the interior. The interior looks more like a Lexus than it does a Toyota.
Oh, totally. Something that's really cool about it is it has this electrochromic roof that Toyota calls the Stargaze roof. So you have sunroof, moonroof, and now you have the Stargaze roof. But it's cool because instead of having to actually clothe something over with some cloth, it's electrochromic, and it will turn opaque and block out the sun with the flip of a switch, which is really, really, really cool. If you think about the way that auto dimming mirrors work, that's what's going on here. That's optional, but otherwise, it's a very interesting vehicle. 3 electric motors, combined system output of 219 horsepower, a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine, and again, it's those electric motors that help with the all-wheel drive, like so many Toyotas that we've seen recently. But I think this is going to be. It's going to be very interesting to see how it competes against vehicles that get literally half the fuel economy. I mean half. That's right. Huge.
And the great thing is, we're absolutely going to buy both of these vehicles for our test program. We'll buy both the Sienna and the Venza as soon as they become available later on this year.
I don't think we're going to get the Ottomans, though. I don't think.
What? I'm going to talk to Gabe Shenhar about that since he decides what trims we buy.
Maybe we have to try out the refrigerator. We can send it over to Yonkers and they can put it in their thermal testing chamber.
Anyway, well, let's move on to this week. I say virtually at the test track because we're really not at the test track, but we are going to talk about a vehicle that has recently finished our whole test program, and that is the 2020 Buick Encore GX. And, this is, those of you who might know that there already has been a Buick Encore for a while. This is actually similar in size, but it's a completely different vehicle. But like the Encore, it's a very small SUV with a little bit of luxury. It competes against vehicles like the Lexus UX, Audi Q3, and Volvo XC40. You can get it in front or all-wheel drive. It's built in Korea. Front-wheel drive versions have a 1.2 liter 3-cylinder turbo with 137 horsepower. All-wheel drive models like the one we bought have a 1.3 liter 3-cylinder turbo with 155 horsepower with a 9-speed automatic transmission. Forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection comes standard, lane departure warning as well. We bought a 2020 Encore GX Select all-wheel drive with the advanced technology package that adds things like a surround view camera, a head-up display, adaptive cruise control, and built-in navigation. And we got a few other options too. All told, with the $995 destination charge, our test car came to $33,145. Keith, I know you spent a lot of time in this Encore GX. Did the more time you spend with it make you like it more or like it less?
Honestly, it made me like it more. So I always think about city cars, and this is really kind of a city SUV because it's very small and very, very small footprint. It isn't necessarily about how well it drives in the city, because if you think about it, if you live in the city and you work in the city, you're not driving to work, you're not driving to the grocery store, you're walking places. You get a car if you live in the city to get out of the city. So it's about how the car handles on the highway that really matters here. And honestly, I took this thing up from the track back home to Boston for a weekend and drove around, and on the Pike and on 395, I really, really enjoyed it. It had a ton of power from a 3-cylinder. It felt springy and sprightly. It felt like there was just always power to spare. Not as much as a Hellcat, but I mean, it's but still, it had plenty of power. And you don't think of that when you hear 3-cylinder. You think kind of whiny, wheezy, tinny, loud. But this, it was there. The passing power was there. It was a great car on the highway. Around town, that things were a little bit different. I would say the two things that I noticed the most were that the suspension, the ride was rough, especially over potholes or bad roads or speed bumps and things. You would really get it would really jar into the cabin. It felt like someone was, kind of punching at you whenever you hit a bump. And also, I noticed that 3-cylinder engine, I think we all noticed this, at idle was exceptionally rough sounding. Jen, I see you nodding there. Did you experience this in your time with a vehicle?
Yeah, and it was not just rough sounding. There was actually some physical kind of vibration at low revs that I think we universally commented on. I'm with you. I liked the Encore GX. I found that once you were through that, once you got into it a little more, that I also found it quite peppy. And I'm one who kind of likes that stiffer suspension, that balance of a little bit more handling with a little, I'll give up some ride comfort if that's, the case. And I found it agile. I loved the size, but it did have that roughness. So that was universally noted. And I also think, we've said this entry-level luxury compact SUV is a segment that's somewhat about compromise. You're putting a lot of money out there and you're compromising a lot, be it power, space, whatever. Because this, and I was looking at, if you compare the price to an X1, for example, the X1 starts at $35,200. The Encore GX tops out at $35,000. You could get the top of the trim with this Buick Encore GX and still not be paying as much as the base X1. And I like it better than the X1. And it's not so tight. Is it big? No, but it's better and feels at least more roomy to me than the X1. Mike, I don't know if you felt the same way.
Yeah, I was mixed on it. Definitely the engine noise has when you really get on the power, it has this raspy sound. It's funny, so it's a 3-cylinder, and it's funny that motorcycle 3-cylinders usually sound great, and they just can't seem to get car 3-cylinders to sound very good. And maybe it's just the different, how motorcycles are used differently and higher revving and all that. But the vibration at 1500 RPM is really annoying that it does. It gets off the line pretty well, as you guys said. That has this kind of sprightly, I love your word, Keith, mid-range power. But and for a small car, I thought, the driving position was actually pretty good. It has a lot of headroom, really nice armrest position. That does have some center console intrusion, but it's more with my shin than my knee, which I appreciate. I think the handling's pretty good, as you said, Jen, although, the suspension does a good job of not rolling much through corners, but the steering is really quite dead. So I didn't appreciate that. And then the visibility is not great. It has really thick windshield pillars, or sometimes we call them A-pillars, and very thick rear pillars as well, although it does have a pretty big rear window. So there's definitely some flaws and enough, sore points in a sense that it didn't score well enough to be CR recommended. And that honestly has a lot to do with that it's just not as refined in some areas, in terms of the ride, in terms of the sound quality and the vibration level as many of its competitors. So, but we do have full road test results up on consumerreports.org. So please go check out the Buick Encore GX and all of the other competitors in that category. Well, with that, let's move on to our next segment, audience questions. Don't forget, folks, send those questions, comments, 30-second video clips to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. We love hearing from you, and we love seeing you as well. And that's why we're going to start this segment off with a video question from Tehran. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hey, Consumer Reports. This is my lovely 2017 all-wheel drive Buick Regal Premium 2. I absolutely love this car, and I bought it brand new in 2017, a lot based on your own recommendations. You guys had it rated very highly, and you guys had Buick as a brand, as one of top of reliability brands, and you also at the time, this car is probably one of the most reliable cars in the class. So I was really concerned when I saw in the latest automobile survey that you guys noted that there were transmission problems with the Buick Regal. But I'm just curious as to what problems you guys are seeing. I would like some more information. Maybe you guys can help me at Talking Cars. What percentage of people in your survey had transmission problems? What kind of problems they're having? I have about 10,000 miles left on bumper-to-bumper warranty. I have about 30,000 miles left on the powertrain warranty. And I just want to make sure that I can keep an eye on things. I do love this car, and I'm hoping I don't have problems, but anything you can give me, any insight you give me is very helpful. Thank you so much, and keep doing a great job at Consumer Reports.
Well, first of all, we love seeing people like Tehran who really love their car. Clearly, he's so excited he bought this 2017 Regal, and that's great. And the awesome thing is he's loved it so far, but he's, being a little worried, understandably, about what's going on with this, below average score for the reliability. And that score, it's transmission major. And so I reached out to our data analyst people, and what we found out is that it's a transmission replacement. Several people have our CR members that report back in our surveys that give us the reliability data have reported some problems with it where it actually needed to have a full transmission replacement. But just keep in mind that the way our scores work for the reliability data is what that means is it has more than average number of these issues for this transmission, and it's a major issue being a transmission replacement. But that doesn't mean that every Regal is afflicted with it. It's just more than average Regals have been afflicted with this problem. So it's just something to keep in mind. But obviously, you've got a good powertrain warranty, and the car's working fine so far. That certainly does not mean that anything's ever going to happen to his transmission, at least not in the foreseeable future. But unfortunately, just can't know. But there have been some issues reported, so that's where that comes from. Let's move on to the next question. This is from Anthony in San Diego. Anthony says, "I currently drive a 2014 Mazda 6 with built-in navigation, and though the graphics look like they're from an old video game, I like using the nav because I'm not on an unlimited data plan from my wireless carrier. I recently had my vehicle in for service and was given a 2020 Mazda CX-5 signature loaner for the day and was shocked to see I could only use navigation through Apple CarPlay and not through a built-in system. Is this the new trend for all automakers? And do you possibly see wireless companies offering more unlimited plans at cheaper costs down the road?" Keith, I'm going to throw this to you. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, so there are a couple of reasons why you might want built-in nav, and it isn't just because of your data plan. It also has to do with access to a wireless signal. So, Jen and Monty, I know you're city slickers, but if you live in the country, you might not always have a signal, and that's wide swaths of the country where people tend to get lost, and there isn't somewhere to pull over and ask for directions. So if you're driving sort of cross country or you're in, Death Valley or something, you're gonna want to have that built-in nav system. What we're starting to see isn't necessarily about phone plans. It's about cars getting their own plans, where cars can actually have a connection in order to download map updates and get that software updates. And that might be something that you might have to pay for. And that tends to be in higher end vehicles. At lower end vehicles or just sort of mainstream vehicles, we're starting to see. You're right. We're starting to see more and more vehicles putting in that touchscreen and not putting in the built-in nav, because the built-in nav is expensive. Like you said, the graphics aren't great. Your phone can do a better job at it. So I think a lot of car companies have said, why not just allow your phone to do the heavy lifting and plug that in? Mazda specifically. And I've been driving a Mazda 3 for the past couple of weeks now, and it's a Mazda 3 that's very well equipped, but it doesn't have navigation. And if you press the button for navigation, it says, "Please visit your Mazda dealer." And Mazda is one of the companies that basically allows you to add nav as an aftermarket option. You don't have to pay for it up front if you don't need it, but you can buy an SD card, plug it in, and you get navigation. I do think that factory nav will be something that is more like that in the future, because I think the majority of car buyers don't want to buy something twice. But we even reached out to Mazda, and they said that there is this sort of core constituency who really wants built-in factory navigation. The other problem with factory nav is that it gets outdated. And if you're using your phone, you'll always know where you are. But if there new developments are being built, you have to, I mean, I remember I had a car with nav back from 2004. And I was driving it around Boston during the Big Dig, and it had no idea where I was ever because the streets it said I was on didn't exist anymore. And it would just, you're in the middle of the water, get out of the water. Right. So the option to upgrade was to get a new set of DVD, or at the time it was actually CDs, and that was hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So if you think about the difference between upgrading to an unlimited plan versus having to buy new map CDs every couple of years, it can come out as a wash. So
as you said, Keith, we reached out specifically to Mazda and I asked them, are built-in navigation systems going away for automakers? And the PR representative I spoke to said, the jury is still out. And then he actually said, what have you been hearing from your readers? So folks, if you want to send us in, let us know. Do you prefer having a built-in navigation system, or have you resorted to you just want to use your phone or you don't want to pay extra for that? So send us a question or comment to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. Let's hear what you folks have to say, so then Mazda will know where you guys want to go.
I think it also has to do with how familiar people are with what they're using. So you think of, my kids, their phone is everything. But my parents, they don't know how to get Google Maps and Waze. They don't use any of those apps. I think I've shared, my dad wants to bring the Garmin and put it up on the dash.
Jen.
Because that's what he's used to program.
As a good daughter, it's your job to teach your parents more about technology.
I try. Yeah. Sometimes it's too difficult. Okay, we'll bring the Garmin. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it is what you're familiar with. And there are places where there's no signal.
And you can get that aftermarket if you really want to, and you don't want to spend for the top trim level and the $2,500 option and the upgraded sound system. Just grab a Garmin or a TomTom or something like that and stick it on your dash and be done with it.
It definitely appears as though automakers are starting to head toward going away from the built-in navigation system. I will also say, opposite you, Jen, my mom is like a tech wizard. She actually teaches me tech stuff about my phone and my Mac computer. But let's move on to the last question. This is
that doesn't surprise me, Mike.
That's hurtful, Jen. That's hurtful. Let's move on to Peter from North Carolina. Says, hi, Talking Cars. Love the show and have been watching since the first episode. I've been online window shopping the Kia Telluride and Hyundai Palisade. When comparing window stickers, I noticed that the Telluride is rated 4 stars for both driver and front passenger frontal crash safety, while the Palisade is rated 5 stars in these tests. Both vehicles share the same platform, and all other crash ratings are the same. Any explanation why the frontal crash scores differ for virtually identical vehicles? Jen, do you have an answer?
So first, thank you, Peter, for the compliments. But this one actually took a little digging, because normally when you go to safercar.gov, which shows all the crash ratings, there's a technical document that goes with each vehicle where you can look at the injury numbers, etc. And while the Telluride had the technical report, it did not exist for the Palisade. So both vehicles are 5 stars overall. But to Peter's point, the frontal for the Telluride is a 4-star. And the frontal for the Palisade is 5. So I reached out to a guy I know who works in NCAP. I know a guy who knows a guy, and he led me to a public document, regulations.gov, and you can actually see all of the injury scores for each vehicle. It's the 2020 NCAP New Car Assessment Program, NCAP Combined Crashworthiness Ratings Calculator, which you can find. Takes some digging, Peter.
It's the home game. It's crash testing the home game.
Right.
So what did you find out?
What he did say is that normally when a manufacturer has twin vehicles, that they identify them as such. They were not told by either Hyundai or Kia that the Telluride and Palisade were twins. So they rated them separately. They actually were rated at different labs. And in that frontal crash rating, particularly for the driver, which is a 50th percentile male, recall, that nearly all of the injury numbers for the Palisade were slightly better than those for the Telluride. The head injury numbers, they measure head injury, neck tension and compression, chest deflection, femur loads, and all of those were higher, resulting in the 4 for the Telluride and the 5 for the Palisade. So both are good vehicles. The other piece of information is that you also have the IIHS data. And there, both vehicles are pretty much goods. They're top rating across the board for all the crash metrics. The only differences there are really in the headlight ratings. Both are 2020 top safety picks. So I would say they're both good vehicles. If you've narrowed it down to one or the other, and this is your tiebreaker, then go with the Palisade with the higher crash ratings.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for doing that research for Peter. With that, we're going to wrap up this episode. If you want to learn more about the cars and the topics we talked about, you can click on the links in the show notes. Don't forget to send those questions, comments, 30-second video clips to TalkingCars@icloud.com. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all next week.